I
What
completely
unfolded on live
disagree with your
television was
assessment.
nothing
How
short
can
of
you say that?
extraordinary
The
as
evidence is
Harrison
The
clear.
Ford,
evidence
the
manipulated.
famously
That's
private
absurd.
and measured actor,
We
finally
need to
reached
act
his limit.
now before it's too late.
Known for his
I
calm
agree.
and deliberate
Decisive
manner,
steps are crucial.
Ford appeared
Let's get this
completely
done.
unmoored, leaving
The
everyone
numbers
in
are
the
clear.
studio in
This is a
stunned
crisis.
silence.
I
This was
agree,
far beyond
but
the
we need a
usual
balanced
celebrity
approach.
interview that
Exactly.
veers off course.
The data
What
clearly
happened
shows
that
an
day
upward
became a
trend in those
remarkable
metrics.
demonstration of
I
what
agree,
can go
but what
wrong
about
when
the
a host
seasonal
pushes
adjustments?
boundaries.
They were factored in.
And Joy
We need
Behar
to
would
verify
learn that
these
lesson in
reports
real
before we
time.
act.
But the situation
The
is
morning
escalating
began like
rapidly.
any
Rushing in
other
could
at
make
the
it
View
worse.
We
Studios.
have to do something now.
Harrison
Your
Ford had
position
arrived
ignores
for
the
what was
facts.
intended
The
to be a
facts
standard
support my
promotional
view.
appearance
That's
for his
not
newest
what the
film.
data shows.
The data
Even
is
in his
clear.
80s,
We need to be
he
cautious
maintained the
before
commanding
reporting.
presence
Cautious.
that has
The public
defined
has a
his
right to
career in
know.
Hollywood.
Rushing this could
He had
cause
agreed to
panic.
the
Action
interview
is
as
what
part
we
of a
need.
media
We have
tour,
breaking news
and no
on the
one
crisis.
anticipated
What's
that
the
the
latest?
session would quickly
Officials are
become one of the
mobilizing
most
resources
talked
now.
We'll
about
keep you
moments in
posted.
daytime television history. As the cameras rolled and the familiar theme music faded, the host sat poised at their curved desk. Whoopi Goldberg offered the customary warm greeting that viewers had come to expect, while an almost imperceptible tension seemed to radiate from Joy Behar. Regular viewers would have recognized her gaze, the one signaling she was ready to provoke discussion. "Thank you so much for being here, Harrison," Whoopi began with genuine warmth. "We're thrilled to discuss your new project." Harrison, dressed in his typical casual blazer and jeans, nodded politely and replied in his signature gravelly voice, "Thanks for having me." Yet before Whoopi could proceed with her planned questions, Joy Behar interrupted, launching the first of many provocations. "You know, Harrison," she began, "I have to ask, and I know our viewers are curious too. Why do you always seem so grumpy in interviews? You've built a reputation for being difficult with the press." The question hung heavy in the air. The other hosts exchanged uneasy glances, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop. Harrison's jaw tightened slightly, though he initially maintained his composure. "I wouldn't say I'm grumpy, Joy. I just prefer to keep things professional and focused on the work," he responded, his tone even but carrying a subtle edge. Joy either missed the warning or ignored it entirely, leaning forward with a smirk that her critics had long recognized. "Oh, come on, Harrison. We've all seen the clips. You practically tore into that reporter last month over flying. And don't even get me started on the Star Wars interviewer." Ford's voice grew cooler as he replied, "Those were different situations. I think you're mischaracterizing what actually happened." Sensing the tension rising, Sarah Haynes attempted to steer the conversation back on track. "Harrison, let's talk about your new film. The role seems quite challenging and unlike what we've seen from you recently." But Joy wasn't finished. In fact, she was just getting started. "You know what I find fascinating, Harrison? Here you are, a hugely successful actor, yet you seem to hold disdain for the very industry that made you famous. You've made millions from blockbuster franchises, but you act as if you're above it all." Her blunt delivery had crossed a line. Harrison's eyes flashed with an emotion beyond mere irritation. "This is personal now. I think you fundamentally misunderstand what I do and why I do it," he said, lowering his voice to a quiet, tense tone that anyone familiar with him would recognize as a warning. "I've never claimed to be above anything. I take my craft seriously, and I expect those I work with to do the same." Joy laughed, a sound dismissive and condescending. "Oh, please, Harrison. Your craft? You point guns and fly spaceships. It's not exactly Shakespeare." The remark landed sharply. For a man who had dedicated decades to refining his craft, collaborating with legendary directors, and embracing roles that pushed him physically and emotionally, having his lifetime of work reduced to a quip was too much to bear. "You know what, Joy?" Harrison's voice rose for the first time, steady yet tinged with frustration. "I came here to discuss a project I'm passionate about, something I've poured months of effort into, and instead, you're taking cheap shots at my career and my character." The studio fell completely silent. Even crew members ceased their movements behind the cameras. This was no longer a simple interview, it had escalated into a confrontation, palpable to everyone present. Whoopi attempted to intervene once more. "Let's just step back," Harrison interrupted, an unusual move for him, cutting her off with controlled force. "No, Whoopi. I think Joy has something to get off her chest. Let's hear it. Let's hear what you really think about actors and our work." Realizing she had pushed too far yet unwilling to back down in front of millions, Joy pressed on. "I'm just saying what everyone's thinking. You Hollywood types live in these bubbles, making big-budget movies about nothing, and acting like it matters. Meanwhile, there are real problems out there, and sitting here making jokes and taking cheap shots doesn't contribute." Harrison's composure began to fracture. "At least when I do my job, I aim to entertain people, to give them something that might make their lives a bit better for a few hours. What exactly are you contributing?" His words were precise, direct, and delivered with a force that Joy clearly hadn't expected. Her face flushed red as the intensity of his response sank in. This confrontation revealed a side of Harrison Ford rarely seen in public, a mixture of principled defense and restrained fury. What began as a routine interview had transformed into a dramatic clash, underscoring not only the pressure of public scrutiny, but also the deep respect and seriousness with which he approaches his craft. It was a moment that captivated viewers and became an unforgettable example of how even the calmest, most controlled individuals have limits when provoked. "I'm providing viewers with the information and insight they need to understand the world," Harrison stated, leaning back in his chair and fixing Joy with a stare that could freeze water. "Is that what you call this kind of reporting? From where I'm sitting, it looks like you're just trying to tear people down to make yourself feel superior." His words hung in the air like a live grenade with the pin already pulled. Joy's face shifted from flushed to pale in an instant, and for perhaps the first time in her tenure on The View, she was rendered momentarily speechless. But silence was not her usual response. "Excuse me," Joy said, raising her voice to match the intensity radiating from Harrison. "I've been in this business for decades, Harrison. I was doing comedy and commentary when you were still pretending to be a carpenter between movie roles. Don't lecture me about contributing to society." Harrison's eyes narrowed with unmistakable intensity. "At least when I was a carpenter, I was building something instead of just tearing things down. And for the record, I never pretended to be anything. I worked with my hands to pay the bills. A reality you might struggle to understand from your privileged position here." The other hosts shifted visibly in their seats. Sunny host kept glancing between the two like an umpire watching a heated tennis match, while Sarah Haynes looked as if she wished she could disappear beneath the desk. Even Whoopi, normally the master at controlling on-air chaos, appeared momentarily unsure how to respond. Joy's voice trembled with indignation. "I worked my way up from nothing, Harrison. I started in dive comedy clubs where half the audience wanted to throw bottles at me. I earned every bit of what I have." "And what exactly do you have, Joy?" Harrison shot back, his tone dripping with disdain. "A platform you use to ambush guests and make them uncomfortable. A career built on shock value and outrageous statements. That's your legacy." The Joy slammed her hand on the desk, causing coffee mugs to rattle. "My legacy is speaking truth to power. My legacy is not kissing up to celebrities like some do. I ask the questions that need to be asked." Harrison laughed bitterly, the sound void of amusement. "Is that what you think you've been doing today? Because from my perspective, it looks more like a personal attack disguised as journalism." Whoopi finally found her voice. "Me need to take a step back here. This is live television." "No, Whoopi," Joy interrupted sharply, never taking her eyes off Harrison. "If Mr. Ford thinks he can come on my show and insult me and my profession, he's going to hear exactly what I think about his arrogance and attitude." "Your show," Harrison said, his voice rising in a way that made the studio flinch. "Last time I checked, this was called The View, not the Joy Behar Hour. And if you believe that asking loaded questions designed to make your guests look bad counts as journalism, you have a very distorted understanding of what real reporters do." The words landed like a physical blow. Joy had always taken pride in her interviewing skills, and to have them so publicly and sharply questioned was clearly more than she could absorb. Her voice now shook with anger. "Real journalists? Like the ones who follow you around asking about your private life? Like the ones digging into your relationships and family?" She shot back. "Maybe I should start asking about those topics if you want real journalism." The threat was clear, and the air in the studio felt 10 degrees colder instantly. Harrison, who had always been fiercely protective of his privacy and family, had now been pushed to the edge. He rose slowly from his chair, towering presence imposing even in his 80s. Every movement was measured, yet his posture radiated barely contained fury. "Are you threatening me, Joy?" he asked, his voice a dangerous whisper, the kind of quiet that precedes an explosion. "Are you really sitting here on live television threatening to intrude on my family's privacy, because I called out your unprofessional conduct?" Joy appeared to recognize that she had overstepped. Her expression flickered, but her pride refused to let her retreat. "I'm just saying that if you want to play hardball, Harrison, I know how to play hardball too. This isn't a movie set where you can walk off whenever you don't like the script." "You're absolutely right," Harrison said, his voice escalating with every word. "This isn't a movie set, but neither is it a place for personal attacks disguised as tough journalism. I respect my craft, I respect the people I work with, and I expect a baseline of professionalism from anyone who sits across from me. That includes you." The other hosts exchanged uneasy glances as the tension thickened. The studio crew had gone silent, sensing that what had begun as a routine interview had turned into something far more volatile. Harrison's words cut through the air with precision, each syllable measured yet heavy with emotion. He was defending more than his career, he was defending his integrity, his privacy, and the decades of dedication that had defined him. Joy's retorts grew sharper, but Harrison's presence and resolve dominated the room. He didn't shout, he didn't exaggerate, yet every sentence carried the weight of someone who had spent a lifetime navigating fame while guarding his personal life with vigilance. The atmosphere was electric, each participant acutely aware that they were witnessing a rare confrontation, the collision of a legendary actor's principles with a host's relentless provocation. In that charged moment, it became clear that this exchange was more than a clash of personalities. It highlighted the tension between celebrity and media, between private lives and public scrutiny. Harrison's intensity, fueled by years of protecting himself and his loved ones, met head-on with Joy's insistence on pushing boundaries for ratings and spectacle. The result was an unforgettable, combustible scene, one that would be remembered long after the cameras stopped rolling. Harrison's voice, steady yet sharp, carried through the studio with authority and moral weight. He had defended not only himself but the respect owed to his craft, his colleagues, and his family. For a man who had spent decades quietly building a career defined by discipline and excellence, this was a moment of reckoning, a public assertion of boundaries that could not be crossed, no matter the platform or audience. "This isn't a movie set," Harrison said, his voice steady but filled with authority. "On a movie set, people show respect to one another. On a set, everyone does their jobs professionally. When someone crosses a line, the director steps in and resolves the issue." He turned sharply to address the cameras, locking eyes with the audience at home. "Ladies and gentlemen, I came here today to speak about a film that I'm deeply proud of, a project that demanded months of dedication from hundreds of talented people. Instead, I've been subjected to what can only be described as a public character attack by someone who seems to believe that bullying guests equals good television." The studio was descending into chaos. Producers scrambled frantically, debating whether to cut to a commercial break. The other hosts whispered urgently among themselves, unsure how to respond, while the crew froze, unsure whether to keep filming. Joy, realizing that Harrison had effectively turned the situation against her, made a final, desperate attempt to reclaim control. "So now I'm the bully," she shot back. "You've spent the last 10 minutes insulting me and my work. You're the one acting like you're too good to be here." Harrison pivoted to face her directly, and the intensity in his gaze would be remembered for years. "I never said I was too good to be here, Joy. What I said is that I expected to be treated with basic human decency. Apparently, that's too much to ask." Joy's voice cracked, practically screaming. "Basic human decency? You want to talk about decency? From the moment you sat down, you've been condescending and rude. You acted as if answering questions was beneath you." "I responded to every legitimate question asked of me," Harrison replied, his tone eerily calm in contrast to her agitation. "What I refused to do was sit here and allow you to use me as a punching bag for whatever personal frustrations you're carrying." That accusation seemed to strike at the core of Joy's composure, and her face twisted with a mix of rage and disbelief. Leaning forward, her eyes blazing, Joy's anger became almost tangible. "Personal frustrations. You want to know my personal issue, Harrison? My personal issue is entitled celebrities who walk in here acting like they're doing us some kind of favor, and then take offense when someone doesn't bow and scrape." Harrison's expression hardened, his face set like carved stone. In that moment the real Joy Behar appeared, not the comedian, not the seasoned commentator, but someone who seemed consumed by resentment toward those who had achieved success,
I completely
using her
disagree with
platform
your
to tear them
assessment.
down
How
out of
can you
sheer
say
spite.
that? The evidence is
The
clear.
You think
evidence
this is about
manipulated.
spite?
That's absurd.
She barked, her
We
voice
need to
rising
act
to a pitch
now
that made
before
everyone
it's
in the
too late.
studio wince.
I agree. Decisive
This is
steps
about
are crucial.
accountability,
Let's get this
Harrison.
done.
It's about not letting
The
people
numbers are
like you
clear.
hide
This is a
behind fame and
crisis.
act as if you're
I
above
agree,
scrutiny.
but we need a balanced approach.
Accountability.
Exactly.
The data
Harrison's laugh
clearly
was
shows
sharp,
an
bitter,
upward trend in
and
those
filled with
metrics.
incredulity.
I agree, but
If
what
this
about
is
the
what you
seasonal
call
adjustments?
accountability,
They were factored
then you
in.
have a
We
very
need to
skewed
verify these
understanding of
reports
the
before
word.
we act.
But the
Real
situation is
accountability
escalating
comes from
rapidly.
Rushing
informed
in could make
critique.
it worse.
We have to do
Real
something
insight
now.
comes from
Your
a desire
position
to
ignores the
understand,
facts.
not a
The facts
compulsion to
support my
destroy.
view.
Joy
That's
abruptly
not what the
rose to
data
her
shows.
feet,
The data
matching
is
Harrison's
clear.
earlier
We need to be
movement,
cautious
but whereas
before
had been
reporting.
composed and
Cautious. The
deliberate,
public has a right
hers
to
was
know.
erratic and
Rushing this
desperate.
could cause panic.
Destroy,
Action is what we
she
need.
demanded.
We have breaking
You
news
think
on
I'm
the
trying to
crisis.
destroy you?
What's the latest?
Officials
Harrison,
are mobilizing
you're destroying
resources
yourself
now.
right here
We'll
on
keep
live
you posted.
television. Every word you say is proof of exactly what I've been saying about your attitude. My attitude. Harrison's voice erupted, a torrent of fury that had been building for the entire interview. My attitude. Joy. I've spent 40 years in this business collaborating with some of the most dedicated and talented people on the planet. I've worked with directors who demanded nothing less than excellence, actors who pushed themselves beyond limits, crew members who gave everything they had to create something extraordinary. In all those years, across every production, I have never encountered the level of unprofessional, vindictive behavior that you have displayed here today. His words struck Joy like a series of physical blows. Her face cycled from pale to red and back again as the weight of his condemnation settled on her. But instead of retreating, she pressed harder, her persistence revealing a ferocity that even her regular viewers found shocking. Harrison, standing with controlled authority, scanned the room, taking in the stunned expressions of the other hosts and crew. Every muscle in his posture communicated a blend of restraint and barely contained fury. He was defending not just his own dignity, but the integrity of his work, the respect owed to colleagues, and the boundaries of personal privacy. "This is not acceptable," he continued, his voice steady yet resonant with conviction. "I came here to discuss a project, to honor the work of everyone involved, and instead I've been forced to endure a tirade thinly disguised as commentary. The level of hostility, the eagerness to belittle rather than understand, is astonishing. And it's a reminder that professionalism, respect, and decency are not optional. They're the foundation of any meaningful interaction, whether on a film set or in a studio like this one." The studio remained tense, every individual acutely aware that they were witnessing an extraordinary clash of personalities. Harrison's resolve, his calm yet undeniable authority, dominated the room. Joy's outrage, her relentless insistence on defending her own approach, collided with his reasoned force, creating an atmosphere that was both electric and unnerving. Harrison's final words carried weight beyond the immediate exchange. He had not only defended himself but asserted the principles that had guided his decades-long career. He stood as a symbol of integrity, of measured strength under pressure, and of the boundaries that even the most assertive media personalities cannot cross without consequence. In that heated confrontation, the difference between skill, dedication, and professionalism versus aggression, entitlement, and spite was made starkly clear. Unprofessional, vindictive. Joy's voice shook with fury, each word brimming with intensity. "Do you know what's unprofessional, Harrison? Showing up on a show and acting like you're too good to actually engage with the hosts. And vindictive. Sitting there with that smug expression, acting as if everyone else is beneath you." Harrison stepped closer to the desk, his presence commanding the entire set. "I have been nothing but respectful to everyone here," he said evenly, his voice low but cutting. "I answered questions. I stayed focused on why I came here. I maintained my composure even while being repeatedly provoked. If you interpret that as arrogance or smugness, that reflects far more on you than it does on me." Whoopi tried one last time to regain control. "Okay everyone, let's take a breath. We'll cut to a commercial." "No," Harrison interrupted firmly, his gaze locked on Joy. "The audience deserves to see this through. They deserve to witness what happens when someone uses a platform to intimidate and harass their guests." Joy's face contorted with pure rage. "Bully. Harass. You arrogant, self-important man. I've been doing this job longer than some of your movies have even existed. I've interviewed presidents, world leaders, Nobel laureates. Don't you dare lecture me on how to do my job." Harrison didn't hesitate. "What you did today is not journalism. It's not entertainment. And it's certainly not professional. What you displayed is the exact kind of toxic behavior that gives daytime television a terrible reputation." Her fury escalated, and her voice soared to a pitch that made the room tense. "Toxic. You want to see toxic, Harrison? Toxic is showing up on someone else's show acting like you're doing them a favor. Toxic is treating the hosts like an inconvenience to be endured. Toxic is your entire demeanor from the moment you walked in here." Harrison's response was quiet, but the calmness made it even more devastating than any shout could have been. "Joy, I walked in here with the same respect I show every interviewer, every journalist, every talk show host I work with. The difference is, they treat their guests with reciprocal respect. They ask meaningful questions, they listen to the answers, and they don't weaponize their platform to settle personal grudges." Joy's voice rose even further, almost screaming. "Personal grudges? What personal grudge could I possibly have against you? I don't even know you." Harrison nodded slowly, letting her words prove his point. "Exactly. You don't know me. You don't know my work. You don't know my character or what I stand for, and yet that didn't stop you from launching attacks from the moment I sat down. You made assumptions, threw accusations, and turned what should have been a professional interview into a personal vendetta." The other hosts were frozen in shock. Sarah Haynes looked like she might burst into tears. Sunny Host stared at her hands, completely silent, while even Whoopi seemed unsure how to intervene. Joy, sensing that public opinion was slipping away with each passing second, made a final desperate attempt to defend her actions. "Maybe you're right, Harrison. Perhaps I came at you too hard. But you know why? I'm tired of celebrities who coast through interviews without giving anything authentic. I'm tired of the rehearsed smiles, the scripted answers, the illusion that everything in Hollywood is perfect." Harrison looked at her for a long, deliberate moment, his voice carrying a quiet sadness that was more powerful than the anger that had preceded it. "Joy, if you wanted something genuine, all you had to do was ask meaningful questions. If you wanted to know me as a person, you could have asked about my passions, my hopes, the things that drive me to keep working at my age. Instead, you chose attack. You chose belittlement. You turned this into a spectacle. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. After 40 years of doing interviews, after working with hundreds of journalists and hosts, I can honestly say that this has been the most unpleasant and unprofessional experience of my career. With that, Harrison turned and walked away from the desk, leaving Joy sitting alone, her face a mask of shock and humiliation. The studio remained silent, the air heavy with tension. One of Hollywood's most respected actors had exited the room, never to return that day. What had begun as a standard celebrity interview had evolved into a defining confrontation, a stark illustration of what happens when civility and professionalism break down on live television. The moment reverberated through the studio, leaving a lasting impression on everyone present. It was more than a clash between an actor and a host. It was a powerful statement about respect, integrity, and the consequences of using a platform for personal attacks rather than meaningful dialogue. It became a scene destined to be discussed and analyzed for years, an indelible reminder of how quickly tension can escalate when personal boundaries are violated in public. Harrison's departure marked the conclusion of an encounter that had started with a simple promotional appearance, but turned into an unforgettable demonstration of self-respect and composure under pressure. The tension, the words exchanged, and the intensity of the confrontation left everyone in the room, and the viewers at home, with a clear sense of the stakes when professionalism collides with provocation. Every aspect of the exchange highlighted the contrast between genuine professionalism and aggressive spectacle. Harrison's measured responses, his ability to maintain dignity despite repeated attacks, underscored why he is regarded as one of the most respected figures in Hollywood. In contrast, Joy's relentless provocation and eventual loss of composure illustrated the pitfalls of conflating personal opinion with journalistic authority. It was a defining moment not just for those on the set, but for the audience witnessing the drama unfold. The encounter offered a rare glimpse into the collision of two very different approaches to media interaction, one grounded in discipline, respect, and craft, the other driven by ego, spectacle, and the need to dominate a conversation. Harrison's calm but firm defense left an unmistakable mark, reinforcing the principles of respect, professionalism, and personal integrity in an environment that often rewards the opposite. The studio remained hushed long after Harrison left, the tension slowly dissipating as the reality of the confrontation sank in. This incident became a powerful case study in what happens when a seasoned professional is pushed beyond tolerance, and how maintaining dignity and composure can leave a far more lasting impact than aggression or hostility. It was an encounter that reminded everyone present, and the viewers watching, that respect and decency are not optional, but essential, even in the glare of live television.